The Mirror of Truth. Once upon a time, in a bustling town by the river, there lived two merchants, Robert and Matthew. Both were well known in the town for their business acumen, but they had starkly different personalities. Robert was honest, wise, and believed in fair trade. Matthew, on the other hand, was clever but often took shortcuts, looking for ways to make a quick profit, even if it meant bending the rules. They had been friends since childhood, though they often disagreed on their ways of doing business. One fine day, the two merchants decided to journey to a nearby village to purchase rare items to sell in their town. It was a long journey through dense forests and rough trails, but Robert and Matthew were determined. They were accompanied by a handful of assistants who helped carry their goods and money. After a full day's travel, they finally reached the village, nestled in a valley surrounded by lush, green hills. The village was bustling with activity as it was market day. Merchants from various places had gathered, displaying a wide array of goods, from spices to silks, from pottery to rare artifacts. As they strolled through the marketplace, something unusual caught Robert's eye. It was an old, antique mirror, resting on a small stall run by an elderly man. The mirror was set in an intricately carved wooden frame with delicate designs of flowers, leaves, and animals. The woodwork alone made it seem valuable, but there was something more intriguing about it. The mirror seemed to shimmer, as if it had a life of its own. Robert was enchanted. "Look at this mirror, Matthew. It's unlike any mirror I've ever seen," he said, his eyes fixed on the mirror's surface. Matthew scoffed. "It's just an old mirror, Robert. Don't let your curiosity waste our time and money. We're here to make profits, not to collect curiosities." But Robert couldn't resist asking the old man, "Excuse me, sir, could you tell us about this mirror?" The old man, who had a long, white beard and kind, wise eyes, smiled mysteriously. "Ah, the Mirror of Truth," he said in a soft, almost mystical voice. "This is no ordinary mirror. It reveals the true nature of anyone who looks into it. It reflects not just the appearance but the very soul of a person." Robert's curiosity deepened, while Matthew rolled his eyes. "Old man's tales," he muttered. But the old man went on. "This mirror has brought fortune to those with a pure heart, and misfortune to those with darkness in their minds. Many have tried to misuse it, but it always reveals the truth," the old man added with a twinkle in his eye. Robert was intrigued. He felt there was something valuable to learn from this mirror. Ignoring Matthew's protests, he decided to buy it. After some bargaining, they agreed on a fair price, and Robert carefully wrapped the mirror and placed it in his bag. Matthew, meanwhile, couldn't help but snicker. "You've been tricked by a storyteller, Robert. That mirror is just an old piece of junk." Robert only smiled. "Maybe, Matthew. But I have a feeling there's more to it than meets the eye." With their purchases complete, the merchants set off back toward their town. During their journey, Robert kept glancing at the mirror, wondering about its mysterious qualities. Matthew, on the other hand, was impatient. "When we get back, I'll prove to you that the mirror is worthless." After a few days, they returned to the town, and word quickly spread that Robert had acquired a magical mirror. People flocked to see it, curious about its powers. Many townsfolk, hearing the story of the Mirror of Truth, came to test it out, eager to know if it could truly reveal their nature. Robert allowed everyone to look into it, and to their amazement, the mirror did seem to show them more than just their reflection. A young boy who looked into it saw his reflection smiling, filled with innocence. An old farmer saw himself surrounded by golden crops, reflecting his hard work and prosperity. A young woman saw herself bathed in a warm, golden light, indicating her kindness and love for others. Matthew, however, grew increasingly irritated. "This is absurd," he muttered to himself. "It's just a mirror. There's no magic in it." But soon, his curiosity got the better of him. One evening, when no one was around, Matthew sneaked into Robert's shop where the mirror was kept. He looked around to ensure he was alone, then slowly approached the mirror. "Let's see what this so-called Mirror of Truth shows about me," he said arrogantly. As he looked into the mirror, he saw something strange. At first, It was just his reflection, but then his image began to change. He saw himself surrounded by piles of gold, jewels, and riches. But there was something unsettling about it. The image showed him holding his riches tightly, surrounded by darkness. His face in the reflection looked anxious and fearful, as if he were constantly worried someone would steal his wealth. The gold in the reflection seemed to turn dull and lifeless, no longer shining as it had at first. Matthew was shocked. He stepped back, his heart racing. This can't be true, he muttered, feeling a chill run down his spine. Unable to shake off the image, Matthew became obsessed with the mirror. He returned to it every night, hoping it would show him something different, something better. But every time, the mirror showed him the same image, a man consumed by greed, surrounded by riches that brought him no joy, only fear. One night, after yet another disturbing encounter with his reflection, Matthew decided he had to do something drastic. "I'll prove that this mirror is just a trick," he said, his voice filled with desperation. The next day, he called a gathering in the town square, claiming that the mirror was a fraud. "This mirror is nothing but a piece of glass. It has no power to reveal the truth. The old man fooled Robert, and now Robert is fooling all of you," he shouted to the crowd. Robert, who had been observing Matthew's strange behavior, stepped forward calmly. "Matthew, if you believe the mirror is a fraud, why don't you look into it here, in front of everyone?" he asked with a gentle smile. Matthew hesitated, but his pride wouldn't allow him to back down. "Fine," he declared, though his hands were trembling. He approached the mirror, determined to prove his point. As he gazed into it, the crowd fell silent, watching intently. Matthew's reflection appeared as usual, but then, just as before, it began to change. The image showed him hoarding gold, but this time, it was different. His reflection revealed a twisted, shadowy figure, clutching onto the gold with a sinister grin. Behind him loomed a dark, empty void. The crowd gasped. They could see the fear in Matthew's eyes as he backed away from the mirror, his face pale. One of the townspeople, a wise elder, spoke up. "Matthew, perhaps this mirror is showing you a truth that you need to confront. Greed and dishonesty may bring riches, but they leave the heart empty." Matthew felt a pang of shame. He looked around at the faces in the crowd, feeling the weight of their judgment. But more than their judgment, he felt the weight of his own guilt. He realized that his obsession with wealth had indeed turned him into the man in the mirror, empty, anxious, and unfulfilled. He turned to Robert, his voice breaking. I'm sorry, Robert. I was wrong to mock you and the mirror. I've let my greed blind me." Robert placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "It's never too late to change, Matthew. The mirror only shows what's inside us. If you change your heart, perhaps the mirror will show you something different." Matthew nodded, deeply moved by Robert's forgiveness. From that day on, he resolved to change his ways. He began to treat his customers with honesty, gave fair prices, and even donated a portion of his profits to help the less fortunate in the town. Months passed, and Matthew found that he was happier than he had ever been. His business flourished, not because of his cunning, but because people now trusted him. He became known not just as a clever merchant, but as a kind and generous one. One day, feeling at peace with himself, he decided to look into the mirror one last time. This time, he saw a different reflection. The image showed him standing in a beautiful, sunny field, surrounded by friends and family. His face was no longer filled with greed or anxiety, but with joy and contentment. Matthew smiled, understanding that the mirror had shown him the truth all along. It had been a guide, leading him to become a better person. As for Robert, he continued to keep the mirror, not for its powers, but as a reminder that the greatest treasures in life were not material. He and Matthew remained close friends, both grateful for the lessons the mirror had taught them. And so, the mirror of truth continued to be a symbol in the town, a reminder that true wealth lay not in riches, but in a pure heart and a peaceful mind.